Right then, part 2 of a cheap adventure to Kharkiv in Ukraine. And along we go to this really posh Soviet building. This is like offices or something, I'm not quite sure what it is. But this is absolutely crazy with loads of spectacular looking bridges. And this building is just epic. And inside this building, it gets even better. The lifts, old Soviet lifts, but not the usual sort you get in the Soviet blocks. These ones, you can only open the doors from inside the lift. This is because they have lift attendants. Some of the floors have buttons on the outside, but the buttons don't do anything. In fact, you can't actually take a lift down to a ground floor. These lifts are only used to transport people from the ground floor up to the upper floors. So I tried to get some footage inside the lift. My footage isn't that good because it's hard to film a lift when there's a lift attendant. Bit of a challenge using this lift when you can only speak English. And this is the oldest one of the lifts, which looks amazing.
Я тоже. Да, тут уже осталось чуть-чуть.
Підліток на Філіппінах врятував сестру з пащі крокодила і син стався в провінції Палаван з 12-річною дівчиною. Коли вона переходила з умов по мосту, її ногу вчепився 4 метри.
Ну, говорит, это только тебя. Думаешь, она что-нибудь скажет, она ничего не будет говорить.
And along into the next part of this building and into another attendant controlled lift. This one's not as old. The first one looked like it was 50s or older. This one looks more 70s looking. And along into the next part of the building, and no! The old lift has been modernised! They've absolutely ruined it! And now on to a crazy bus. As I'm in Ukraine, I've just got to take a ride on a crazy bus. The crazy buses are privately owned buses that actively compete with the public run buses. So, before I say how much a crazy bus is, let's just think about the price of public transport. A trolley bus costs in English money just 18 pence to go on, and quite a lot of the trolley bus drivers are a bit slow. Now, the trams in Kharkiv also cost 18 pence to go on, and they are very slow because the track is in such bad condition with loads of massive gaps in it, and some parts of the track sink as the tram goes over it. The track is really bad. Make sure you check out my video of the trams here. And there's also the metro. It's really efficient. Trains are Metrowagenmarsch classics and it runs really well. Make sure you also check out my video of the metro. The metro costs slightly more to go on, 25 pence. So with all that considered, how much do you think a crazy bus is? Well, a crazy bus costs 32 pence to go on. Quite a bit more, especially compared to other Ukrainian cities. And I must say the crazy buses weren't as crazy as Kiev, sadly. So it's interesting they cost a lot more, but they do get you where you want to go quite a bit quicker than the other public transport. And now I'll go along into the countryside in Kharkiv. And just take a look at this bridge. A bridge that's barely staying up, or it's almost collapsing. This is a bridge on a footpath, there's no maintenance at all. The bridge is collapsing, but still lots of people walk across it. And now along to the cable car. Kharkiv has a classic Soviet cable car, which I really wanted to go on, but sadly it was closed for maintenance. No! And now to the next lift in one of the very small shopping centres you get across Ukraine, and the lift is an Asian generic lift. I was quite surprised to find one of these in Ukraine. And now I go along to Kharkiv city centre. A very small area right in the middle of the city. It's the only part of Kharkiv that's actually got money spent on it. Notice that the roads, pavements, and most of all the curbstones along the pavement are all in good condition and look like any other European city. It is very odd that all of the funding they have is concentrated all into this very relatively small area, and as soon as you walk a bit out of the city centre, everything immediately goes back to all being deteriorated and rotting away. I find that quite shocking that the ordinary areas where local people live are very deteriorated and so run down, and all the money spent on this little area, and I believe that's because they're hoping they'll attract tourists into Kharkiv, but it's not really working. Very few foreigners come here. Very few foreigners are like me and want to visit the outskirts, because I didn't really find the city centre that interesting, to be honest. Although one thing I did like in the city centre was this nice well lit colour changing bridge. Also, another thing money's been spent on is the traffic lights. All of the traffic lights, not just in the city centre but all over the region, have all been replaced with these shiny LED ones. So money spent on some things is quite weird. And now I go along to pretty much the only European international style shopping centre in Kharkiv, which has some cone eco discs. So let's now leave the city centre and go back to the outskirts where the interesting stuff is, and the rest of this video will be looking around different Soviet blocks and along to the next one. And this one looks amazing, one of the most epic looking Soviet blocks I've ever seen. Every little bit of this building looks different where people bodged it. And inside, will it have amazing lift to match the outside? Well, sadly not. The lift hasn't been modernised, it's still relay controlled, but it's been heavily refurbished. Well, this is the most epic looking of all of the Soviet buildings I've seen so far, but it's got the most boring lift. It's actually still relay logic, so it's still a Soviet lift underneath, but it's all clean and which one's stop one? I think it's that one. No? Was that one? No? Oh well. And now along to the next Soviet block. This one has got a Soviet Mark I lift. And now go along to the next Soviet bloc, which is another classic. The Concierge was in. The first one I've actually found at the Concierge. And now along to the next Soviet bloc, which sadly has a refurbished lift, and it looks horrible! For fuck's sake. Boring. Although it's actually relay, it's still Soviet underneath, but ruined. Fuck, that's loud. Reversal trick. Stop and the flowy one at the same time. So that is now the end of the video. So I want to go to more obscure places, because the more obscure places are, the more interesting are. I want to go off the beaten track. But now it's time for the ultimate question. Should I go to Luhansk and Donetsk, which is a place at the UK government's website that says advise against all travel? It is technically a war zone, even though I believe there isn't any actual fighting. It's an area under dispute. These two areas want to be independent to Ukraine and have heavy Russian influence. They want to be part of Russia. A place at pretty much foreigners do not go. It'd be very interesting to visit there. But is that going too far? Should I visit there? Leave a comment in the comment section.